We joke around about event monitoring being a party, but if you think about the idea of CRM data being in the thousands or even the millions of records, this is like orders of magnitude more, right? This is millions or billions of records, right? And that is a party, right? Depending on how you look at it. For me, on a daily basis, I really do think it's a party. But why do people want to experience event monitoring? Well, it's because we know that we have a lot of customers who are using Salesforce for mission-critical applications, and it spurs these questions, right? What are my users doing? Am I getting the return on investment that I expect as I roll out S1 or Chatter or other new IT projects, right? How do I help my end users the same way Salesforce helps us, right, as customers? And so we just released event monitoring, and event monitoring, what it does is it gives transparency into the operational health of an organization. Now, what's interesting here is the underlying technology that event monitoring is based on, app logs, have been around for 15 years, since the inception of our service. It's not rocket surgery, it's just logs. But what's interesting here is in the past couple months, we released this as customer facing. And as an add-on service, that means that people now have the ability to do the same fundamental things that we've done internally for the past 15 years. So for instance, we look at use cases like support, right? Every time you call up your customer support rep and you say, I've got this problem, this issue, I need to resolve it, we say, okay, let's go query the app logs. And we get insights and we share that back to our customers. We are in effect helping to support them. Every time Mark Benioff gets on stage at Dreamforce and he talks about Apex usage and Visualforce usage, well, he's getting that data from a team of very talented data scientists who are data mining logs, right? Every time we look at a malware attack vector or do a forensic investigation, we look at that audit use case. And we even provide 2 weeks after an event, we might provide through a forensic investigation access to raw log files, but that's kind of a one-off difficult process. How great would it be if you could actually just get these logs on your own? And then lastly, optimize. The ability to actually find out really what's going on in production with my Visualforce pages and Apex classes and API. We spend a lot of money on integrations. Now a little bit less thanks to Lightning Connect, which I dig. But one of the interesting things here is in Lightning Connect, I had this question come up the other day. Can we track Lightning Connect activity in event monitoring? The answer is of course you can. We track API callouts. Since this is an API callout, every single time you call out to the SAP tab, I'm tracking it. So this is a very powerful feature for being able to understand really at a very granular level what's going on in your organization.
Absolutely. It almost sounds in a way that we're arming customers with the same tools that a large company like Salesforce has been using in order to support our customers. They're finally getting their hands on it for themselves.
That is it. So all the things that we do to support our customers, we now enable our customers to do for themselves. And it's really a pretty easy system. Right? How it works is every single day we're capturing events. Not just one or two, but billions and billions of events. And we're writing them very quickly to a text file that sits on our log server. And every night we ship that log file off to Hadoop, and we MapReduce over it, and we generate content for orgs with the service enabled so that they can download a CSV file. And we do this across 28 different event types, which I'm happy to share with you. We have this great schema doc we just produced so you can get full visibility into what's going on here. And those 28 event types, what happened was 2 years ago when we started the design process, we went out to customers and we said, well, if you had this data, we know you've been asking for this, but if you had this data, what would you do with it? What actions would you take? Would you modify your governance policies? Would you track the performance of your Visualforce pages and Apex classes? Would you track failures so you could fix them? Would you improve the application performance? What kinds of things? And from that, we derive these 28 different types. So once you have this data, right, and you've downloaded it, it begs the question, well, what then? Well, really, to make an intelligent business decision, you want to visualize it. And you'll see, especially at the bottom of the slide, you'll see some of the plugins that already exist that we have default integrations with, right? We work with Salesforce Analytics Cloud Wave, which I'll show you a demonstration of today. We work with Splunk and New Relic and Fair Warning and CloudLock and SkyHigh and CloudBit. And these are just the default integrations, right? Really, anything that can take a CSV file, we can integrate with. It's that easy. Or one of my favorite use cases is I'll get calls from customers in Europe saying, yes, but can I keep the data for 25 years. Right? I think 25 years ago, what was I doing? There was no internet. But 25 years from now, you can go back and take these downloaded CSVs and use them for regulatory purposes. So not only can you gain key business insights, but you can also store it for audit and compliance use cases as well. And all of this is to take some kind of natural action. Well, I love actually talking through what those actions are. And as a demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and flip over to my laptop so I can show you exactly how this works.
Sure, let's hop into that demo.
All right. So my use case is very simple here. And the thing to understand is, as I said before, this is not rocket surgery. It's just logs. So every time anyone clicks around, whether a rep goes to, say, reports, and they look at their customer list and they click export details and they export that, and now that Excel spreadsheet is sitting on their laptop. Well, we call this a data leakage detection use case, right? And I had this come up at Dreamforce. A customer came to me and said, I have this problem. One of our reps left to go to a competitor, and we started losing deals to that competitor, and we think it's because he walked with intellectual property, customer data, and opportunity pipeline data, but we have no legal recourse. We can't do anything with it. Wow. So with this feature enabled, they have that ability, right? And here's how they would actually get that data. So the first thing to know is this is an API-first feature, and if you ever listen to my podcast with Mike Gerhold or read my blog, Salesforce Hacker, you'll know I love the API. But the funny thing about the API is when you show it, it's like a blinking cursor. Hey, check that out. That's cool, right? It's a blinking cursor. So I went ahead and I built, using Visualforce and my Force.com certification, Force.com developer certification, I built this Visualforce page that wraps around our API just so I could show how this looks. And the first thing to understand is this is the exact same API we use for accounts and leads and contacts. It's how we enable Lightning Connect. And in this case, all I'm doing is when I run my query, I get back, instead of an account, lead, or contact, I get an event log file object. And with this object, I get data about the file. I know, for instance, this is my API file. I have a Visualforce file. I have my web logs with URIs. But back to my use case, report exports. Right? So every time someone takes data off the system, I know about it. And I know what date this is good for. Again, this is from the previous day. I know the size of files so I can plan for storage, but most importantly, I get this endpoint. And what this endpoint gives me is access to the data itself. So I'm going to drop that endpoint into my nifty Visualforce page, and boom, data, right? Beautiful data. Now, you show this to an integration specialist, and they're going to go, oh, I get it. I know what to do with it, right? You show this to us mere mortals, and we're like, huh? Okay, so squirrel and headlights. Let's actually, I built this other application that does nothing more than parses CSV data. This is like CS 101 stuff. You can download this from my GitHub repo to play with this, but the goal here is just to look at the data and understand it. And what happens here is it just simply loads up for a given day a collection of different file types, API and Visualforce and web logging and REST API, but most importantly, my report exports. So it pulls back some data, and the first thing to understand about log data is it should answer who, what, when, where. And that's what this does. I know that this was a report export. I know the timestamp in GMT, which I can easily convert. I have a request ID, which is really useful to correlate across different file types. So a typical malware attack looks something like this. Session ID is compromised. The malware comes in, and it just keeps exporting out reports. And so we track that with the request ID because it becomes very clear when that happens. I have my organization ID, which is useful if I have multiple orgs. I can now correlate across all of them. And I have my user ID. Now, usually when I show user ID, again, I get the squirrel and headlights. Well, that's because it's immutable. It's really useful for being able to render. And more importantly, because I have access as a customer to my API, I can convert those user IDs into usernames. So now I can play the game of Clue. Adam admin downloaded the accounts report in the library with a wrench. Okay, well, let's go back to the original form, because most interestingly enough, I can even take that data and I can recreate the event. So for instance, I'm going to come back into my address bar, and notice it'll take me directly back into the report. And then I can actually take this report description, which describes all of the parameters of the report when it was downloaded, and hit return, and notice it just downloaded that report.
Wow.
So I can derive really cool information. Data tells stories. And there's no place that's more powerful than when you pull that into a visualization engine like Salesforce Wave. We announced Wave at Dreamforce, and I've got to say, it's one of the greatest tools for exploring data. And when you have billions of rows of data, you want to explore it. You want to find that needle in a haystack. And so the way it works is I pull in those files into data sets. And from those data sets, I create an application like Admin Analytics. And it gives me the ability to create dashboards. So for instance, I can take a look. This is across 131 million rows of data. I can see the logins and the clicks and the S1 transactions. And I can compare these, more importantly, side by side by side. And then I can dig into my audit use case. And I can ask the question, well, over the past week, what was my baseline of report exports? And how many did I have? And I can even drill into that information and facet my dashboard, which is one of the coolest things I can do here, because if I want to dig in to a particular user, I can say, okay, tell me more about this user right here. 340 exports over the course of the last week. And I click on it. Wave does all the magic for me. I can see what IPs they downloaded from. I can see what their behavior is, because now I can do anomaly detection. And I can determine, is this part of their workflow? Or did they just walk off with that customer list? And I can do this not just for the audit use case. I can look at adoption metrics. I had 1.7 million logins across 21,000 active users. Yeah, sure, I can run operational reports against this, but this is actually what they're doing. This is their usage. I get 28 million web clicks. That's a lot of clicks.
That's a lot of clicks.
That is a lot of clicks. And I can track that not just in the web, but also mobile S1. And we've been getting a lot of questions about that. How do I understand what people are doing as I roll out S1? Are they actually using it? You know, and I find in organizations I talk to, field traditionally will use S1 more and web less, but inside reps will traditionally use web desktops and mobile less. And I can dig that into things like Visualforce adoption, operating systems, rows processed by API, and now I can actually track down with Lightning Connect how many rows are going back and forth with us and SAP. I can even track when people are downloading App Exchange packages or upgrades. I had a bank who was very concerned about upgrades happening in the middle of the night. They wanted to track it. Or sandbox status, because I want to plan for that 30-day refresh. I want to go ahead and plan and find out, well, where am I with my existing sandbox processes? And then, of course, I believe in failing fast, and I failed fast many times in my lifetime. I will fail fast many times more. The goal is to fix those failures, and we will tell you, for instance, report failure trends. Tell me how often reports are failing, because the last thing I want is my CEO to have a failed report, especially at the last quarter. So I'll track how many report failures I had, how many columns I had in those reports, right? Because one report I saw once had 971 columns, right? That is acts of report ridiculousness right there. And then finally, for the developer operations in minded, I want to optimize, not just, of course, reports and dashboards, but most importantly, I want to look at things like Visualforce. Tell me what my average runtime is for Visualforce. Tell me, on average, how many bytes are being requested, how much are coming back, what the view state is. Now, we have incredible developer tooling. We have our developer console and our tooling API, but what's challenging is that is really good tools for a developer. This is really for site reliability and DevOps. And this we can trend over the past week what a developer would only look at in a small glimpse of a few minutes or an hour. So this becomes a really, really powerful, I mean, I think we hit the nail on the head. It is a party for people who like data. So if we can flip back over to our slides, we have just a couple more things to talk about there. Of course, this is an add-on service. It is available for Enterprise Edition, Unlimited Edition, and Performance Edition. And the reason why is simply because it is an API feature. So where the API is, that's where we're going to fit in with. We do keep the data around for 30 days.
Okay.
And I get a lot of questions about, well, how do I just try this out? And what a lot of people don't know is you can sign up for a Developer Edition org, which you get 2 users, 2 megabytes of space, but you get it forever. I still have the same Developer Edition org I got when I joined Salesforce 10 years ago. 10 years ago. It's still around. It's got a good bit of stuff in it. So if you have Developer Edition, we automatically enable it. We give you 1 day of data retention, and I even put a bit.ly link up there so you can sign up, so you can try it out today, right? So this is very easy. Now, where are we going in the future? You know, it's interesting. This was meant to get application logs out to customers, but there are really 4 key things that I've heard from customers as feedback that I want to roll into my next year's worth of work. And those center in around, it needs to be closer to real time, right? Particularly as we get into things like data leakage and performance. It needs to be queryable. So in addition to be able to easily download a payload, I want to be able to ask questions about specific people or processes. Tell me what happened in the SAP Lightning Connect. Tell me what Seema Kumar is doing in the application right now. It's creepy, but it works. So it needs to be queryable. It needs to be extensible, right? When someone comes in from another application into Salesforce, I should be able to track that transaction so that we can actually identify what system they came from, right? And have an external ID to it. Or better fingerprinting so I can do login forensics around that user. And then lastly, we need to stream that data out and push it out to systems that are SIM-based or performance-based so that they can get that data and actively work on it. So the first step of this is a pilot that's coming out actually with this Spring 15 release called Login Forensics. And it looks at log and event data where it's near real time, it's queryable, and it's extensible. And not only can you get all these, but also we create automated roll-up aggregate metrics that will give you the ability to see and trend per user, what IPs are they using, what browsers are they using, what applications, so that we can create a true fingerprint of who this user is. And that is the tip of the iceberg. Because over the course of the next year, we're going to focus in on that compliance use case and that data leakage use case. And we're going to look at every single time people go and they view a report or they run a SQL query. Tell me about the query string. Tell me what columns they asked for. And most importantly, tell me what actual records they saw. Because if I correlate that back to field history tracking, I now understand the state of data, and from a compliance standpoint, that can help me understand exactly what people saw. A typical use case is accounting of disclosures with HIPAA, where I can answer the question, who saw Mark Benioff's contact record? How did they see it? And what was the data at the point that they saw it? And we're going to continue to build on that trend. And you'll see an example of this in the slide where we have these metrics and we have this ability to actually find that needle in a haystack.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned how important this is for customers who have to deal with rigid compliance requirements. I mean, this sounds like an incredible tool, especially as it moves, as you said, faster to that real-time data.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that any industry that has to deal with compliance issues has ever had a tool quite like this to make sure that they are minimizing their risk, whether it be HIPAA or any other compliance standard.
You got it. I mean, this is as bare metal as it gets. You won't find another cloud provider who actually exposes their application logs they use to do forensic investigations, to do support, to do optimizations, and make that available to customers so that they're empowered with all the same tools that we are internally.
It seems like a really incredible first of its kind tool. But I have a question for you.
Sure.
Now, I know that everything that you talked about was focusing on usage around the API. Why is this tool API only?
Oh, I love that question. So 2 years ago when we started designing this, we went out to customers and we asked a lot of them, we said, why wouldn't you just want a dashboard in setup, something like system overview, where we could just show you a whole bunch of cool canned metrics? And universally what we heard was, that will only help me if I'm in one org, and a lot of our enterprise customers especially are in multiple orgs. And because you're only giving me roll-up aggregate information, I never can drill down into it. So I'm not satiated. I need more data to answer ad hoc questions. So we took a look at it and we asked, okay, well, what if we just expose the data for integration purposes? What would you do with it? And universally we heard, well, we actually have a budget for logging, and we use these logging tools like Splunk or New Relic or HP ArcSight. And so if I can commingle your log data with my log data, then they come together and there's happiness. And not only that, I can do that across orgs, and I can get a more comprehensive view based on my use case. So we focused on the plumbing, knowing that the data itself told the stories, and we would be able to work with our fantastic partner ecosystem to build default plugins, and we would be able to build incredible visualization apps on top of it if it was API first.
Incredible. Well, I think that answers any questions that I had, but Sam, I'm curious as to what questions our customers might have out there in the Twitterverse.
Well, we answered one of the questions in terms of is this feed-based and what edition this is on. So just to restate it, it's got to be an API edition, so enterprise, group, enterprise performance.
And unlimited.
And then it is a fee-based currently right now.
It is an add-on service. You know, we have a lot of auditing tools built into the platform already. We have login history, we have setup audit trail, we have field history tracking, and we have a plethora of monitoring features around developer and imports. This really is so bare metal to our application logs, and because of the additional processing, storage, and expertise that goes into the actual definition of those files, it really does become a premium value in terms of what you can do with it.
Now, I know from personal experience that this is a phenomenal tool if you're doing any kind of forensics. So if you don't have something like this today, what are your options?
You know, it's interesting. You do have other options out there. There are man in the middle, so there are proxy servers like reverse proxies and forward proxies, and these tend to work exceptionally well when you do something like you download a file. It's unstructured data. Where they can get a little bit more challenged is around structured data like accounts and leads and contacts, these things that are in our S object universe, right? And they tend to be a little bit more challenged along those things. Interestingly enough, I've been working with many of the reverse proxy vendors out there, like Sky High Networks. You'll see they have a fantastic ability to not only pull in that unstructured file data, but also look at the event monitoring data for a more comprehensive picture. And I'm seeing that more and more with customers where they're actually doing things like web tracking and Visualforce pages. They have the proxies like Sky High or Cipher Cloud, and then they augment with event monitoring because no one is more tightly coupled with our platform. No one is more guaranteed to stay up through upgrades. No one has the least amount of latency on the actual wire because, as I said, we've been doing this for 15 years, and you've never known that the wizard has been behind the curtain, right? When you click on a button, you don't have that delay, right? There is no point of failure. There is no person in the middle. It's right there. So when you actually start to get a comprehensive view across all these things, then the story just becomes more interesting.
Well, I'm fascinated from a perspective of understanding the Salesforce product that I'm bringing into my org and how can I increase user adoption, what are they using, how are they using it, where are they going, and using that data to help guide my change management that I do inside of the org. I just think it's really exciting. There's one question that I wanted to highlight here. Is there an integration with Wave?
Great question. So, interestingly enough, I work very closely with the Wave PMs. They are a phenomenal bunch, and they are making leaps and bounds on a daily basis. And so I will be running a pilot in March with application templates, the same applications that you're seeing here. I'm actually meeting with the PM, Francois, this afternoon, and we're going to work on how we can actually get customers who are using both event monitoring and Wave and have these predefined application templates in their system. When you couple that with the ETL that you can do from my blog, Salesforce Hacker, it becomes trivial. But I'm going to make this even more trivial because one of the things I'm working with the Wave PMs is an automated feed of data. So we will actually handle the process, this is on my roadmap, to stream the data not just into CSV files, but to stream it from Hadoop directly into the API for Wave so we can populate the data sets. And when coupled with the application templates functionality, will give you a quick start Wave application with data and everything.
And Christian and a couple other people asked, you know, they want to be connected with you, and you just mentioned your blog. Can you state that again? Because Christian, they want to know, can you share your Visualforce? Can you share some of your code? And I'm betting that blog is the place for them to go.
Oh yeah, you know, it's funny, I went down, I was at an on-site with a customer a couple weeks ago, and they read the blog, and they were able to get started so much faster because the blog is about best practices, tips, tricks, pointers to code. People ask, can I get the quick view you showed me, the REST API, jQuery tool? All of it's downloadable. Just go to salesforcehacker.com. It sounds like it's a malicious thing. It's not. It's the I get that every time. It's the original term hacker from the 50s and 60s where computer scientists were really about discovering how to solve problems. And it's like Life Hacker. It's best practices, tips, tricks around event monitoring and authorizations. So Salesforce Hacker is the place to go.